Bev Oda, please come back. All is forgiven. Bev Oda, you will recall, was a federal cabinet minister who was drummed out of power. And the PR reason, the final symbol of her political problems, was that she once expensed a $16 orange juice to taxpayers while on a government trip. 16 bucks, that's a lot of money for an orange juice, which is what they charge you at a luxury hotel sometimes. Oda was actually an outstanding minister by the numbers. I mean, she saved Canadian taxpayers millions of dollars by cutting wasteful spending. But that one orange juice just became a symbol of her personal style. 16 bucks, eh? Well, what about another Stephen Harper appointee who was appointed back in 2006, who has racked up $760,000 in travel expenses since that time? $760,000 for travel. You could almost buy yourself a private jet for that. Who is this rock star? Who is this amazing man? Is it John Baird, the foreign minister? Maybe that kind of travel bill would be okay. I mean, it is his job to travel around the world to improve our relations with foreign countries. Was it John Baird? Or maybe it was our defense minister, Rob Nicholson. Did he rack up $750,000 jetting back and forth to Afghanistan to visit our troops and other Canadian military around the world? That's still a lot of money, but I guess it's probably quite expensive to get right into the rougher parts of Afghanistan. Well, it wasn't John Baird, it wasn't Rob Nicholson, it wasn't Bev Oda. It was this guy, David Langtry. I know you're saying David who tree? David Langtry. He's the acting chief commissioner of the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Seriously, David Langtry of the Canadian Human Rights Commission has racked up $760,000 in travel expenses. How? How do you do that? I mean, I know the Human Rights Commission. They're inventing counterfeit human rights all the time over there, like the human right not to be offended, the human right for a man to use the women's washroom. I know all about those newfangled false human rights, but I never heard of the human right to travel the world like a prince at taxpayers' expense. How can I get me some of those human rights? Let me say again, this guy was appointed by Stephen Harper. Now, I know why it's been a long time getting Canada out of deficit here. How can a human rights commissioner spend that much taxpayers' money traveling? I mean, is it something like this? Is he traveling on elephant back? Or maybe it's something like this, a luxury yacht, or I don't know, maybe it's this, a stretched pink Humvee, I don't know. No, it's two things. First of all, the Canadian Human Rights Commission spends countless thousands of dollars sending David Langtry to exotic international meetings in places like Switzerland. Oh, he loves Switzerland, and who wouldn't? Because they're very important meetings to attend over there. And Langtry is a very important man. You see, he sits on an international committee of other countries' human rights commissions, so he just has to go visit them, you know? I know, it's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. So he flew at our expense to the dictatorship of Jordan, because, you know, human rights. He flew to the authoritarian regime of Venezuela, because, you know, human rights. Of course, he travels to other places, too, like London, England, on your dime. These are important meetings, and he is an important man. Take just one of his trips. Here it is. He went to Switzerland because there were some important meetings there from March 12th to 14th this year. And then there were other very important meetings there from March 17th to 21st. So he had Canadian taxpayers send him on March 9th all the way to March 21st. He had a few days of meetings in Switzerland that he just absolutely had to attend in person. Very important. Better go for nearly 2 weeks, you know, for business, not for pleasure. No, not for pleasure. Bev Oda did not drink that $16 orange juice because she was thirsty. She did it for you. And David Langtry did not go to Switzerland on a taxpayer junket because he likes it over there. He didn't add on a few days beforehand and take a few days in the middle because he likes it. No, he did this for you, you lowly taxpayer. And you paid $12,000 for this one trip. But here's the crazy thing. Langtry's exotic jet setting around the globe did not account for the bulk of his travel expenses. Most of his $760,000 was racked up just going back and forth between his home in Winnipeg and his office in Ottawa. Let me say that again. David Langtry has worked at the Human Rights Commission since 2006. He's its acting chairman now. He's the boss of it. It is based in Ottawa, but he hasn't moved there. He has kept his home in Winnipeg, and he bills taxpayers to jet back and forth, to commute. You pay his airfare, his cab fare, his hotel. He's been doing this since 2006. I mean, just take a look at a typical few months of his travel schedule. Look at this. It's called regular business. In 3 months, just to go back and forth, he billed you $17,736 just for 3 months. He's been doing this for nearly a decade. So let's back up. Let's go slowly here. You're hired to work in Ottawa. It's a full-time job. It's a job, as in you applied to work there in another city, but you insist that you will not move there? Because why? Because you're too special? And so you demand to be paid to be flown back and forth to work at the taxpayer's dime on top of your regular pay. You say this with a straight face. And Stephen Harper's conservative government, Stephen Harper's penny-pinching, tax-cutting, deficit-fighting government says yes, says sure, says $760,000 in 8 years. That's a lot of orange juices, but sure. Most people work for a living in order to pay for their house and travel. David Langtry gets paid, and then he gets his travel and his Ottawa housing paid for him in addition. This is his permanent full-time job. He was appointed to a 5-year term and then another 5-year term, and who knows, maybe another. But he will not move to Ottawa. He makes you pay for it. His travel bill is $760,000 and counting. And this is acceptable. Hey, Finance Minister, what do you think? A new MRI machine or letting David Langtry rack up a zillion frequent flyer points? Speaking of which, who gets those frequent flyer points? Is there a perverse incentive for Langtry to rack up the maximum in expenses possible, since you, the taxpayers, are paying for those expenses, just so he gets maximum points? I mean, close to $20,000 a month in travel expenses? You can buy from Air Canada something called a flight pass, by the way. It's like a bus pass, you know. It's an unlimited fly as much as you want kind of thing. You could literally fly every single day for a flat fee. I went online today to see what it costs to buy a flight pass between Manitoba and Ontario for unlimited use on Latitude class in Air Canada, which means they automatically bump you up to the business seats, the fancy seats if there's any open. Unlimited is $3,800 a month. To fly economy, unlimited between those two provinces, is $2,900 a month. As if it's still reasonable to commute at taxpayer expense. But my point is, if for some reason you manage to convince the Harper government that you are so amazingly important that they will pay for you to commute from Winnipeg every week or so for 8 years without moving, why would you bill $17,000, $20,000 a month instead of cutting that way, way down to $3,000 a month with a flight pass? Why wouldn't you give a damn about taxpayers? I wrote to David Langtry today asking him who gets all those frequent flyer points. I asked if he does. I asked if he uses them for his family or for vacations. I asked if he ever takes his family or friends on junkets with him to those luxury destinations like Geneva or London. I invited him to come on the show to answer too. He didn't write back, but his spokesman did, who didn't answer any questions about frequent flyer points or family or friends travel. Why not? Those are easy questions. They're yes-no questions to answer. Makes me even more suspicious that they didn't answer. So I wrote back again, asking very specifically, does he keep his frequent flyer points personally? Does his family or friends join him on the junkets? The spokesman didn't answer that second reply yet. If he does, I'll tell you about it. He did say that everything was in accordance with Treasury Board guidelines, and that since Langtry was only appointed for a 5-year term and then reappointed for another 5-year term, the government agreed that they'd pay for his commute, even though he's now in his second 5-year term. That must be nice, eh? Now, I've shown you a few pages from the government's proactive disclosure on their websites. It's shocking that this is just out there and no one from the media party reports on it. Well, today, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation put out a press release on it. Good for them. It will be interesting to see how much coverage this $760,000 travel scandal gets compared to Bev Oda's $16 orange juice. See, both are Stephen Harper Conservative appointees, but Langtry runs the left-wing Human Rights Commission. Oda was cracking down on waste in foreign aid. Pretty easy to guess which way the media party will go on this one. Bev Oda needed to be fired over an orange juice. David Langtry is worth every junket, worth every commute, worth every fancy hotel room. Well, let me tell you this. The $760,000 travel bill, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I have in hand a 3,000-page access to information request that we had to fight for from the Human Rights Commission. It's all of David Langtry's expenses. They initially refused to give it to us. We had to appeal to the Information Commissioner, who had to press them to give it to us. Gee, it doesn't sound like they're feeling guilty or anything, does it? Well, we finally got it, 3,000 pages. I started reading through it. It's huge. It's crazy. It's appalling. Just handling all of David Langtry's expenses is practically another job in itself at the Human Rights Commission. He practically needed a full-time travel agent and concierge. What an important man. I started looking through the 3,000 pages, and then I thought, I need to get some help. Will you help me? Will you please help me look through the 3,000 pages of David Langtry's expenses and tell me if you find anything egregious? Let me rephrase that. Can you please help me find the most egregious things in it? I have put the entire 3,000-page document in a searchable PDF format on a website called langtryexpenses.ca. You can look through it, search for keywords, read the whole thing through, browse, whatever. I haven't looked through all 3,000 pages. It's a feast, though. But maybe if a dozen of us or 100 of us go through it together, we can really give it a good vetting. So on my website, langtryexpenses.ca, just type that right in your browser, there is a form that you can use to submit what you think are the most interesting aspects of his expense claims. What's the biggest expense you can find? What's the smallest? What's the pettiest thing that he billed taxpayers for? What was the most exotic trip? I see he went to Iraq once. What was the most luxurious? I'm guessing Switzerland. What's the most unhuman rights-ish? Maybe his trip to Venezuela. Tell me what you find. Submit it on that website, and I'll do a follow-up show on it. But also be creative, be inspired, indulge your artistic side. What do you think David Langtry was doing with all those extra days in Switzerland? What do you think he was doing in Venezuela? How about in Jordan? Send us a fun Photoshop, sort of a Where's Waldo thing, and we'll put the funniest ones on TV too, just for fun. But this is serious too, you know. The Canadian Human Rights Commission has outlived its usefulness. Canada is the most harmonious country in the world. We don't need professional grievance mongers. We already have protection for minorities in housing, for example. You can't kick someone out of their apartment, say, for being black. That's against the Landlord-Tenant Act. You can't fire someone from their job for being the wrong religion. That's against employment law, contract law, labor union law. The Canadian Human Rights Commission was invented in the 1970s as a political advocacy group. It has outlived its usefulness. Our real courts can handle any problems remaining. Now the Human Rights Commission is just about jet-setting busybodies, looking to stir up disagreements in our harmonious country. As you know, until last year, when Parliament finally repealed its censorship powers, the Human Rights Commission was regulating the internet under Section 13 of its law, stamping out politically correct opinions, not crimes, not law-breaking, just opinions they didn't like. That's how useless the Human Rights Commission is. That's the place that David Langtry runs. So besides helping me comb through his expenses, and besides having some fun coming up with some internet memes or Photoshops, let's sign a petition to the Auditor General. That's right, the Auditor General. Obviously, the Conservative government is just fine with paying some bureaucrat $760,000 to commute back and forth to work. Well, if the Conservatives don't find a problem with this, maybe the Auditor General might. Maybe he'll do something. We've got a petition on this same website, langtryexpenses.ca. Let me read the petition to you. We, the undersigned Canadian taxpayers, are appalled that a government bureaucrat can rack up $760,000 in travel expenses, including on luxurious foreign junkets. We demand that the expenses of David Langtry and all other expenses of the Canadian Human Rights Commission be audited by the Auditor General. We're going to send that petition to Michael Ferguson, the Auditor General himself. I wonder what he has to say about our jet-setting Human Rights Commissioner. What do you think? Go to langtryexpenses.ca and let me know. Other than you, me, and the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, you know that no one else will do this if we don't, right?